Welcome to The Art of Charm. I'm Jordan Harbinger. The Art of Charm brings together the best coaches in the industry to teach you guys how to crush it in life, love, and at work. Imagine having a mix of experienced mentors teaching you their expertise, packing decades of research, testing, and tough lessons into a concise curriculum. We've created one of the premier men's lifestyle programs available anywhere, and it's free. This is the show we wish we had a decade ago. This show is about you, and we're here to help you become the best man you can be in every area of your life. Make sure to stay up to date with everything going on here and get some killer free ebooks as well as drills and exercises that'll help you become more charismatic and confident by signing up for the newsletter at theartofcharm.com. If you're new to the show but you want to know more about what we teach here at The Art of Charm, listen to the Toolbox at theartofcharmpodcast.com/toolbox. That's where you'll get the fundamentals of dating and attraction, such as body language, eye contact, vocal tonality, all that stuff that's more important than you might think. We've got boot camps running every single month here in California. Details at theartofcharm.com, and I'm looking forward to meeting all of you guys here at The Art of Charm. Enjoy. Today we're talking with Dr. Timothy Pitchell of the I Procrastinate podcast. We're going to talk about procrastination, in case you didn't guess, and what it specifically is scientifically, why it's bad, and of course why we do it. We're going to talk also about what makes a task aversive, in other words, likely to get procrastinated upon, and of course those things that we always want to avoid, like taxes, etc., and why we think we'll feel more like doing it tomorrow, which of course we always do. We're also going to talk about why procrastination is not a time management problem, but is actually a self-regulation problem. And that, of course, changes our strategy for dealing with it, which, of course, we're going to talk about the effects of procrastination. It's not just a matter of a few all-nighters, but also how we can stop the needless delay, including the importance of something called pre-decisions, getting rid of anemic, broad goal intentions in favor of specific implementation, as well as the role of self-compassion. If you're beating yourself up about procrastination, you're actually making it worse. And this is going to be a very important episode, so don't delay and don't put it off till tomorrow. Listen to it now if you suffer from procrastination or know anybody who does. Enjoy.
Well, hey, Jordan. My name is Tim Pitchell, and I'm an associate professor of psychology at Carleton University in Ottawa. And I'm also the director of the Center for Initiatives in Education. And really, those two roles show the dance in my life between research and teaching. I'm really a teacher at heart. It's led me to understanding other things better, including procrastination. And for the last 20 years, I've been studying pretty much solely procrastination, how our action breaks down. But I didn't start there. I started by looking at people's goal pursuit, what they were doing, how it made them feel, and it quickly became obvious to me that what we say we're going to do and we don't do is where the story was at in terms of the effects on our well-being. So after studying for my PhD and doing a dissertation on people's goal pursuit, I turned a corner and started looking at the breakdown goal pursuit that we commonly call procrastination. And that's led to all sorts of things, including a podcast like your own and some writing on Psychology Today, a new book, all those sorts of things. Things I was just sharing with people so that they could understand the kind of things that I was learning, because it's really important for me to share what I know. So that's a little bit about me.
That's great. And now, how did you get interested in procrastination?
Well, I was doing my doctoral research on people's goal pursuit. So I was studying how people went after their goals and how it made them feel. And as I did these interviews, I met very successful people. I was studying doctoral students. In fact, I can remember meeting one young woman who, at the age of 30, already had 2 master's degree and a law degree, and she was working on a PhD in political science. And she was deeply troubled by procrastination, and I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, that doesn't really add up, does it?
No, but, we live different kinds of lives, and I guess she was maybe always working under the gun, and she didn't like it. She knew that she was accomplishing things, but she didn't like the way she was working. And I met other people who were ostensibly in a PhD program, but were putting things off. I can remember interviewing one student, and I said, "What are you doing?" I kind of sit around the lab and complain about things with my friends. Well, what are you supposed to be doing? Well, I'm supposed to be working on my comprehensive exam. So why aren't you doing that? Well, I don't know what to do. Well, why don't you ask your advisor? Oh, I can't let him know I'm not doing anything.
Wow.
This big
catch-22, yeah.
Yeah, so I began to realize that, goal pursuit is essential for our happiness, but the breakdown in goal pursuit is really important to understand for understanding our unhappiness, our dis-ease with ourselves. Because even people who accomplish a lot still didn't have a lot of life satisfaction or strong feelings of well-being if they're always doing it at the last minute. They would say, yeah, I'm successful, but I really hate the way I work.
So essentially,
No,
so essentially, you will, even if you're accomplishing things and you're getting it done, because a lot of people are going, I don't care, I procrastinate, but I get it done. It actually hinders our enjoyment of accomplishment in the first place because we're procrastinating. Is that what I'm understanding?
It does for many people, but I know the moment you say that, some people will say, no, it's just the opposite. Like when I pull it off, it just feels fantastic. And there's no doubt about that. When we push up against a deadline and we build that pressure and we release that pressure, that feels pretty good. And so there are a lot of rewards built into getting it in under the wire. And there's a lot of safety too. So if I leave things to the last minute, of course, I'm self-handicapping in a way. And if I succeed, wow, aren't I hot? I did that at the last minute. And if I fail, I can always say, well, I only did it in the last minute. So there's a lot of things that are rewarding about last-minute efforts. But on the whole, most people will say, yeah, I wish I'd started earlier because this is really doing me in.
Right. So it's a built-in excuse if you fail. And then if you win, it's this adrenaline rush thrill.
Yeah, that's right. And so some people have said, well, exactly, there's a whole group of procrastinators that are thrill seekers. Joseph Ferrari, a researcher from Chicago, DePaul University, back in the early 90s, classified a whole group of people as arousal procrastinators. And we've been debating that a great deal, and we published papers to say we don't see that. We don't see sensation-seeking correlating with procrastination. We don't see a group of people who actually work at the last minute for the rush. Now, it doesn't mean you don't get a rush, but the reason you're working at the last minute wasn't to get the rush. It was because you wouldn't do it earlier. And that's the story we need to talk about today. Why is it we put it off to the future? Now, there's no doubt that the last minute efforts lead to a great rush, and there is a good feeling about getting it done, but there's also lots of regrets that we've learned from people as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, let's back up the truck a little bit. I think, what is it that makes a task aversive, that we hinted at in this PhD student who said, I can't tell my advisor, I don't know what to do. What makes a task aversive in the first place? I mean, I know there's lots of things like doing my taxes, and that's kind of like a national sport, procrastinating on that. And it's a running, it's almost like a running joke around America, right? Like, oh, it's April 14th, do your taxes today. And it's like, it's so ridiculous because, for God's sake, you should have done your taxes 2 months ago, right?
Well, it depends. If you're going to get a return, do them early. If you're not, well, then why do it early?
Yeah,
and
lend the government money. Yeah.
We've got all sorts of forms of delay. Delays are a necessary part of life. Everybody delays things, and it can be quite intelligent to delay things. We call it sagacious delay, knowledgeable delay. It keeps you from doing things impulsively, from making mistakes by being rash. So there's no doubt that in any given day, we're going to delay things. So we choose to do one thing over another because it is a higher priority. That's just wise. It's part of making priorities.
Sure.
But procrastination is one form of delay, and that's a voluntary delay of an intended act, even though we know that that delay might come back and bite us. Now, you got to know it's not a perfect world, so we can never be certain it's going to come back and bite us. But all things considered, we realize, it's in my best interest to act now. I actually made the intention to act now. And the only reason I'm not going to do it is because, and usually this is what we think, I don't feel like it. And so there's a lot of things I want to talk about in there about this notion. If listeners take away just this one idea of, we tend to say to ourselves, I don't feel like it. And we're going to use that as a turning point about who says you have to feel like it to do it. So procrastination is a voluntary delay of an intended action, despite knowing we're probably going to be worse off for it. Now, when does that happen? That leads to the question you asked me about, well, what makes a task aversive? We put off things we don't want to do. They're aversive somehow. So they're frustrating, or they're boring, or we don't know how to proceed, like that graduate student we were talking about. She said, well, I don't know how to do comprehensive exam. So there's uncertainty. All those things are part of it. And in fact, when we look at task aversiveness over the period of a project, so, early in the game, we're kind of got an idea we're going to do something, and then we get into a planning stage, and then we get into an action phase. Well, aversiveness changes over the course of that time. At the beginning, we find things aversive that aren't personally meaningful to us. So they're not enjoyable, they're boring, they're frustrating. We're liable to put those off. But when it gets to the action phase, when actually we're supposed to have the rubber hitting the road, it's not whether it's personally meaningful anymore. It's whether it's manageable. So it changes from meaning to manageability. And when we get in the action phase of a project, if we don't know how to do it, if we don't know how to structure it, we're uncertain what to do, we can't manage it, then that's aversive for us. So aversiveness has many flavors, but it comes down to this. We end up thinking, I don't want to do this. I'll feel like doing this. I'll feel more like doing this tomorrow. And that's the big lie we tell ourselves.
Yes. It's me with booking any airplane flight because it's annoying and you always feel like you're getting a bad deal.
But you see, that's interesting. My colleague I've already mentioned, Joe Ferrari at DePaul University, he's more of a behaviorist at heart, and he'll say, we reward procrastination because if you buy your Christmas presents late, if you buy Christmas presents for any kind of gift like that at a holiday season, the sales keep getting better. Yeah. And likewise with the flight, you could book it today and be sure you're getting a seat, but if you wait, you might get a last minute deal. And so sometimes we reward these delays, but I don't think that's the same as procrastination. I think that what happens is you think, I should book that flight. And for whatever reason, you go, I hate doing that. I don't feel like it. I'll feel more like doing that later. And that's the whole story there. We got to unpack. So why is it? Why do we think we're going to feel more like it later? Why won't we do it now? And why do we treat our future self so badly? Because we're really just setting ourselves up, right? Because later on, you still have to do it. And now you're under the gun.
Yeah, that's weird. So what is it that why do we think we're going to feel more like we'll do it tomorrow? I mean, why does that even happen?
Well, this is good. And you'll have to interrupt me because I'll go quickly through this, but there's a bunch of things we have to think about. First of all, there's a guy named Daniel Gilbert at Harvard University, and he's done a lot of interesting work on affective forecasting. That means forecasting how we're going to feel in the future. We're not very good at it. In fact, I think weather forecasters are better. So when you're trying to think about how you're going to feel tomorrow, he's found that we rely a lot on today. So imagine now that you're going to procrastinate. So imagine it's, for example, the airline tickets. You think, I should book those tickets. I don't feel like it. I'll do it tomorrow. So you've avoided it. You've put it off. So how does that make you feel? Well, the whole point of this avoidance was to get some mood repair. You didn't feel like it. Now you don't have to do it. So you feel a little bit better. I'm not saying you feel great. You're not going to go dance, but you're happier than you were when you thought you had to do it. So you rely on how you're feeling now to predict how you're going to feel in the future. So naively you believe future self is actually going to feel like it because I feel pretty good right now. So that's one part of the story.
So you're drugging yourself with dopamine or something, right?
Well, it's a trick that the mind plays. It's just the way the human mind works, that we rely on the present to predict the future. Here's a common example. Okay, what's it like when you go grocery shopping, you've got the cart in front of you, and you're going grocery shopping on a day where you've just had a big meal versus a day when you're hungry? Our carts look very different, even though the week ahead is just your average week. Why? Because we rely on our present state to predict what we're going to feel like in the future. And when you mention drugs, drug addicts, even after ingesting their drug of choice, will say that they won't desire the drug as much in the future. And it's naive. Of course, they're drug addicts. They have a regular habit here. But after they've ingested the drug, we naively think, no, we don't need it. We don't want it. So we rely on our present state to predict our future state. So that's one of the reasons we say, I'll feel more like doing it tomorrow, because at the moment we're feeling pretty good. So that's one piece. Now, the next piece is even more interesting. A guy named Hal Hirschfield at New York University, I think it's the Stern School of Business he's in. I think he's a marketing professor. Very interesting research he's done. He's looked at the discrepancy between present self and future self. So Homer Simpson's done this really well, too. Let me tell you how Homer's done it. He and Marge are talking, and Marge says, Homie, these kids are going to grow up soon, and you're going to wish you'd spent more time with them. And Homer says, that's a problem for future Homer. Man, I don't envy that guy.
Yeah.
And so Homer gets it, right? Homer gets it that we treat future self differently somehow. So Hal Hirschfield's done some interesting research to show us how. So, for example, imagine that you and I go into one of Hal's experiments, and he would say, we've got this new medicine, and it's very effective, but it tastes horrible. And people have to drink a fair bit of it. So we want to see how much you're willing to drink. And you're in the condition where it's the present self, and I'm in the condition where I'm thinking about future self. And you're more likely to say, I'll drink a few tablespoons. And because I'm thinking about future self, I could probably drink a third of a cup. And it comes out that way all the time. And also, if we were given the condition of how much do you think someone else would drink, they guess or they predict a third of a cup. Now, there's an interesting story right there. We treat future self like a stranger and present self very much different than them. So Hal took that further, and he actually did brain scanning, functional magnetic resonance imaging of the brain when we're thinking about present self, future self, and a stranger. And interestingly, he found that different parts of the brain were active when we thought about present self and future self. And the parts of the brain that were active when we thought about future self were more like the parts of the brain that were active when we thought about a stranger.
Oh, wow.
We really do think about future self like Homer does. Man, I don't envy that guy. Like, he's some sort of other stranger. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of the problem so why do we think we're going to do it, feel like more of it tomorrow? Well, when I've avoided something, I'm feeling pretty good right now. So now I predict tomorrow I'm going to feel pretty good. And the other thing is, I don't really think about future self too seriously. I think about future self more like a stranger. Future self, yeah. Future self will drink a third of a cup of that garbagey stuff. For me, a few tablespoons max. That's it. So that's a part of the whole puzzle here for us to work on, is that, how do we bridge the gap between present self and future self? And we have to do a bit of really effective time travel. So let me tell you one more study Hal's done. And he's, one of the things we don't do very well is save for the future. How many of your listeners right now have big pension plans?
Sure, not too many, probably.
Right, and yet every week you could be putting something away, but every week you can always make the choice, well, no, not this week. This week I really need a new speaker system, or I need a computer, or whatever, new pair of jeans, or it might be food. It can become as basic as that. But for many of us, we have a bit of disposable income, and we're not saving it. So imagine you're in one of his experiments again, and you're in one group, I'm in the other. The group I'm in, I'm looking at a picture of myself on the screen, and I'm deciding how to allocate some money I have. You, on the other hand, you're looking at a picture of yourself on the screen, but it's been digitally aged. So it looks like you when you're 70. And lo and behold, you allocate money differently than I do. You are more likely to put money aside for the future. So he's looked at how we might bridge that present future self gap by thinking forward, by having a stimulus in front of you that says, oh yeah, that's me. Oh boy, it would be a good idea when I get that old if I have a bit of cash. And so one of the things we're doing in our research now is saying, well, how do we do that on a more moderate time scale to say, how can I think about future self at the end of the week under all this time pressure because present self on Monday said, I don't feel like it. So that's all the pieces of the puzzle, I think, about why we think we'll feel more like it tomorrow.
Okay, so it's not really a time management problem, because a lot of people think, like, especially college students, well, you need to manage your time better, and it's because, you don't prioritize correctly, and it's not really that. It's totally a self-regulation problem.
Exactly. It's really not about time management. And I really get frustrated when we say you use students as an example, but just about anyone, you buy them a day timer, right? Actually, most people are pretty good at estimating time. In fact, back in the 90s, we did studies where we put people in a room that had no other stimulus, and we'd have them estimate time. And we'd already pre-selected these people as being high and low on procrastination, but the experimenter didn't know who was going in the room. And we distracted them by having them do some math problems so they just couldn't count. And lo and behold, high and low procrastinators were just as able to estimate time. And then some of my students said, well, that's a ridiculous experiment. Like that's too short a period of time. Where procrastinators really screw up is estimating time to do a project. So we did similar studies in classrooms where we'd ask people to predict how long they're going to study for a test and when. And then we collect up those predictions and we give them a diary and say, now keep track of when you study. And we figured for sure the procrastinators would have more of the planning fallacy. They'd say, oh yeah, I'm going to study a lot. I'm going to study early. But in fact, they differed from the non-procrastinators, but it wasn't that. The procrastinators studied less and studied later, but that's exactly what they predicted too. It's not that they're broken. It's not that it's a time management problem for most of them. It's really an emotion regulation problem. They give in to feel good. They say, I don't feel like it. And they get that mood repair of avoidance. And procrastination is an avoidant coping strategy. We're trying to make ourselves feel better. And we do in the short run. But then it comes back and takes a big chunk out of our behind.
Hey, guys, I want to take a quick break for a second here. You've heard me talk a lot about taking you to the next level in life, at work, and in your relationships. And you've also thought to yourself, yeah, I do want to up my game. I want to become a better man, a better boyfriend or husband, a better person in general. And my guess is that you've been thinking about this for a long time. Am I right? Well, I'm here to tell you this. Stop thinking. Your chance is now. Do you really need more time, more information, more plans for the future, or do you want to become that guy today? Because the truth is this. You can be the guy who sits around and thinks about becoming better, or you can be the guy who decides that today is the day that he's going to become awesome and take action in that direction. And I want that for you. Why? Because you've already got what it takes. The potential is there even if you don't know it yet. Join me and thousands of guys who've taken action in their lives at theartofcharm.com. All right, let's get back to the show.
Wow, okay, excellent. So what are the effects of this? I mean, we've seen that college students run all-nighters. You know, they constantly are doing that, and they're constantly trying to play catch-up. Are there other effects of procrastination?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people think it's that you're going to fail. And as I said earlier, not everybody does poorly. They just don't really like how they're working. I have many A-plus students who are procrastinators. The thing with procrastination is it relates to effects on well-being, which I also noted. That's why I got studying it, because I realized, wow, the story of our unhappiness and dissatisfaction is when our goal pursuit breaks down. But the other big effects on procrastination are on our health. That surprised us. Back in 1997, Roy Baumeister at Florida State and his wife Diane Tice published a paper about academic procrastination over the two terms. And in September and through the fall, those students who were procrastinating, they were feeling pretty good. They didn't have any complaints, and lots of times I think it's because they're living in la land. Nothing was due. They had no stress, and they actually were functioning better than the non-procrastinators. But the next term, the next semester, that's when the poor procrastinators, it all hits the fan, and they are paying the price, and they saw more health problems. Well, then I had a student, Fuchsia Sirwa, who's now a Canada Research Chair up here and a professor in her own ranks. She did research looking at this, and she realized that, there's a few things going on. Procrastination increases our stress, so we get the direct effects of stress, which we know compromises our health. But then she found that procrastinators had fewer wellness behaviors. That is, people who tend to procrastinate don't eat as well, don't sleep as well, don't exercise as much. And so that's a downward spiral. At the same time, procrastinators also had more treatment delay. And there's a problem as well, especially for older people.
For healthcare stuff, yeah?
That's right. Oh, yeah, I should get that mole looked after. I better get that blood test. My doctor said I need to go for that blood test. Or, all of those things. That treatment delay catches up with people, too. Not so much with younger people because there's a lot of tolerance, right? But as we get older, that we pay a price for that treatment delay. So there's indirect roots of procrastination on health, treatment delay, and fewer wellness behaviors. And then there's the direct effects of stress. So procrastination is not just a matter of a few all-nighters or bad performance. In fact, lots of procrastinators do quite well. And it also affects our social relationships. I think we all experience when we're procrastinating and a printer breaks down, it becomes a national emergency, right? We call everybody in. And the same thing around the house. Like if I procrastinate during the day, and then I come home and my son might say, come on, Dad, let's play. And I say, I can't, I got to work. Whenever you're a procrastinator, or you don't have to be a procrastinator all the time. Whenever you put things off needlessly, somewhere else has to give in your life, and that's often our commitments to others. So procrastination has effects on other people as well, and we call that almost like the secondhand effects of smoking. We have the secondhand effects of being around someone who just can't get things done.
Yeah, that would get annoying and wear on everybody around him as well.
Oh, yeah. If you're on a team with someone who procrastinates, it can really be annoying. And so teamwork is affected. And because I do this research, so many people will tell me, you should study my workplace. It's so dysfunctional. And I work with all sorts of people that find it to be a big problem in their workplace. So, there's more to procrastination all-nighters. And I think it's important to realize those costs because that can create a commitment to change. You think, this is really not doing good things for me. Perhaps I should find some way to change.
So how do we change? How do you stop procrastinating? I mean, it seems really difficult. It's probably like quitting smoking.
Well, it is difficult, and there's no way around that, we've got these emotions are part of our limbic system, what some people like Tversky call a fast brain, that we react quickly, and we like immediate mood repair. And then there's this slow brain, this more evolutionary new part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, that planful, organized part that inhibits things. And that takes a lot of energy. And so we're creatures of habit. We react to things emotionally. And it's very hard for us to constantly, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to do that. I have to think differently. And there's no doubt about that. So I'll talk a little bit about, what are the kind of things we can do to stop? Well, some of them are there already when we think about time travel. We have to think about future self and realize, it's me that's going to be facing this task later. And it's not going to get any easier per se. And then I'm going to be under pressure as well. So just do a little bit of time travel helps us think more differently. But I would argue that the first place to start was a little bit of mindfulness. If you're not even aware of the emotions you're feeling, then there's not even a chance for you to kick in your prefrontal cortex, your executive function, to say, okay, I have to do something different here. You're too busy walking away. You're too busy avoiding. So some emotional intelligence, some mindfulness, that's really kind of the first step to being able to recognize that I could exercise some self-control. But it doesn't all have to be an exercise of will. Like I think the other thing that you have to think about is there are strategies we can use. So, for example, if I talk to one of my thesis students and I say, what are you doing? They'll say, working on my thesis. I think, you're doing nothing, because that's just too vague to mean anything.
Too general, yeah.
That's right. So let's stop making general sorts of intentions. If you say, oh yeah, I'll do that project on the weekend, both of those things are just too anemic, too weak, too general. Do that thing. It's too non-specific. And on the weekend, well, the weekend starts somewhere Friday afternoon and ends Sunday, maybe Monday morning, right? So when is it exactly you're going to do, and what are you going to do? So instead of making general, vague intentions, you need to make very specific implementation intentions. You want to make a decision about how you're going to implement things. So I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to come back to that specifically, but the strategy here is a pre-decision, so that you're pre-deciding ahead of time what you're going to do in the situation. In situation X, I'm going to do behavior Y. Saturday morning, just after I have my coffee, because I love to have a coffee in the morning, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to work on the first 4 pages of this report. Something really specific. So now I've put the cue for action in the environment just after my coffee Saturday morning. So after my coffee Saturday morning, my brain's ready for that. Oh yeah, I'm going to my desk now. And so if you can make more implementation intentions, it's been shown in various studies, numerous studies, that it's much more effective than just making vague goal intentions. So that's another strategy you can lay on top of there.
Excellent.
Let's take another. I like to exercise. I also like to have a nice cold Guinness at the end of the day. And so at the end of the day, I might come home and think, I'd like to ride my bike. I should ride my bike. I'd like to have a Guinness. So what I want to do is make the threshold for riding my bike low and the threshold for having a Guinness high.
You're using your own psychology against yourself.
Exactly. I'm trying to make, and we got to constantly do that. So I leave the beer on the counter. I like my Guinness cold. I come home, there's my bike right in front of the door. Okay, I ride my bike while that beer chills, and I get both of those things. But if I don't make it easy for myself, I can always say, oh, well, I got to get the bike down, and I don't even know where I put my riding shoes, and yada, 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 and the beer's right there. Always take the path of least resistance. So try to make the path of least resistance towards the thing that you want to do. You want to trip over your workout clothes and have to struggle to do the other thing. And if you can do that, that's going to help as well. So those are some of the things that you can do to defeat procrastination, but I'm going to give you just one more. And it's just huge for me, and that is you got to hang on to the notion that, I don't know where we came up with this belief, but so many of us believe that our motivational state has to match the task at hand. And my 6-year-old son teaches me that all the time. I'll say to him, hey, Alex, it's time to make your bed. And he'll say, I don't feel like it. I don't want to. I'll say, Alex, I didn't ask you how you felt or what you want to do. It's time to make your bed. So right from when we're young, it's kind of like, well, if I don't feel like it, I'm not going to do it. Our feelings don't have to match the task at hand. In fact, social psychologists have shown us that our attitudes will follow our behaviors. So my magic mantra is just get started. Now notice that's not the Nike slogan of just do it, because just do it is huge. Like just do the whole project. No, just get started. Just find some place. It's a bit like saying just go for the run. That's pretty big. All I want to do is just get started. Just get your shoes on and start moving down the road. And I know I don't run much anymore because of my knee. But when I did run, once I got started, for the first 100 meters or so, I think, who does this? This is stupid. Like, why would anybody do this themselves? About 500 meters down the road, I'm thinking, I'm a god, I could run forever. This is wonderful, right? And you can see how irrational both ends of that spectrum are, right? That on the one hand, I'm thinking I can't do it at all. The next minute, I think I could run forever. That's the other thing about our brains. We just have these predictably irrational thoughts. So my mantra again is just get started, find a way to get in motion a little bit, and you'll prime the pump. All of those things will help stop needless delay.
Definitely love priming the pump. It's like when I first wanted to start running, and I've told this story on my show a million times, so I'll spare the audience the boredom. But essentially the example is I couldn't get myself to run, so I told myself, all right, I have to put my shoes on every morning and go outside in the freaking freezing Michigan winter, and then I can go back upstairs and go to bed if I want to. And, of course, by the time you're on your front porch with your gym clothes on and your shoes on, you're going running.
That's it. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. And in fact, I even harness other things in my life. That's an interesting twist when I tell you what I'm going to tell you, but I have a sled dog team. And I've had a sled dog team for 20 years.
What you did there.
Classic. Yeah, exactly, the harnessing. But, I care for my dogs a great deal. So no matter how I feel, I'm going to get out there and care for them. And once I get outside, just like you, I go, whoa, nice out here. It's not nearly so bad. And then I get on with the other things I'm trying to do with my life. So, yeah, you want to, it's a bit of a trick you're going to play on yourself, but just get started. You can do anything for 5 minutes, right? Just make a deal with yourself. I'm just going to do this for 5 minutes. And then one of two things happens. What typically happens is you realize this is nearly as bad as I thought. And we've seen that in our research. You should know that all of this comes from various studies. When we had pagers on people and we followed them throughout the week, when they finally got down to it, they said, well, this earlier. This is not nearly as bad as I thought. We make these things up in our minds that they're awful and I can't do it. And then we get into it and go, this isn't so bad. I wish I'd given myself some more time. So just get started. Hang on to that. I think that earlier stuff about future self is really important, that your motivation doesn't have to match the task at hand. That's a really important idea. And then when the push comes to shove, always say to yourself, let's just get started. Let's not make any more of it than that. I'll give you one final example with my son, with the bed, because I didn't finish that story. So I've said to them many times, and I don't have to anymore. I'll say, Alex, you know what? I'll give you $1 if I can count to 10 before this bed is made, and I'll count 1001, 1002. He goes, great. Now I've got his attention. I start the count. 6 seconds later, his bed is made. And there's a lesson at that point that so many of the things that we gripe about and we push back against, we use more energy not doing it than simply moving forward, right? So that's another simple lesson. We all have a 6-year-old alive and well in us. We have to recognize that. We're saying just what the 6-year-old would say, I don't want to, I don't feel like it, it takes too long. And you're using more energy fighting it than just getting started.
All right, let's take a quick time out for a sec. Some people think the Art of Charm boot camps and programs are just about picking up girls. And honestly, there's some of that. 1 week with us and you'll be rocking out in that department, I promise. But as a guy, I know how important it is to be awesome and well-rounded. And not just awesome with girls. Awesome at work, awesome at home, awesome with your friends and family. Guys really need to step it up everywhere. And that's why we call our company the Art of Charm. That special something that gets you results wherever you go. And trust me, the results are real. Every day I get new emails and calls from the guys who decided to take our boot camp, and what I hear is simply amazing. Just weeks after graduating, they land a promotion, they form a new wolf pack, start a new business, or even find a partner. They have a new life, and it's not an accident. Find out why at theartofcharm.com. All right, let's get back to the good stuff.
That's all super solid stuff so far. Now, we talked about, prior to the show, we talked about the importance of pre-decisions. What exactly is that? Is that the getting rid of broad goal intentions and looking at really specific stuff? Is that what you'd mentioned before?
Yeah, pre-decisions is it takes work. You said, gee, it sounds like a lot of work. It is, because we have to break habits. And you don't break a habit by getting rid of an old one. You have to establish a new one. And so if you're an impulsive sort of person and you take the first offer that comes your way, a pre-decision you might make is you recognize it in yourself and you say, okay, someone calls me tonight. My pre-decision is I'm just going to say, no, I can't go out. I've already decided to stay home and work. full stop, right? You've made the pre-decision. You don't leave it to that moment because you're impulsive. Or you might, if you want to take a middle ground, say, look, I'll call you back in 10 minutes. I won't take my decision until I've thought about it for 10 minutes. So it's a pre-decision. So pre-decisions are always just ahead of time recognizing that, okay, it's pretty typical of me to want to update my Facebook page. My pre-decision is I'm shutting it off for the next hour while I get something done. If you try to run it all up at the same time, you know what's going to happen. Habitually, you've got the phone in your hand before you realize you've even picked it up. So the pre-decision is to preempt that which tempts, get rid of it, right? So there's many pre-decisions we can make that keeps us from being our own worst enemy. And that just takes effort. Now, of course, it's possible to procrastinate on those pre-decisions, right? It's a kind of a second-order procrastination. Like I should save for my savings account. Yeah, I'll set up an automatic withdrawal, and then you procrastinate on setting that up, right? So that it's always possible to self-sabotage. But these are still good strategies, these pre-decisions, to help you turn a corner. So it's moving from broad goal intentions to specific implementation intentions by making pre-decisions ahead of time about what you're going to do and when.
Interesting. So we sort of, yeah, exactly. We figure out our own psychology and we take a preemptive strike against a destructive habit. Now, going back to that's a problem for future Homer, is it possible, and I'm guessing it's not, I mean, I feel like we all would do this, but is it possible to sort of time travel in our head and go, wait a minute, future Homer is going to be totally screwed, look at all the stuff that I'm setting up, or is it just kind of, can we look at present-day consequences and say, this is because of my actions in the past, or is that just unrealistic human psychology?
Well, it's not easy. It can be done, and that research I talked about with Hal Hirschfield, when he shows you a digitally aged picture of yourself, it's helpful to have some stimulus to help with that. Athletes do it all the time. Visualization. You know, is it helpful to think about yourself competing in the race and thinking of if you're a downhill skier, for example, thinking about every turn where every gate is? Absolutely, it is. Every winning athlete will do that visualization. So, can we visualize how future self is going to suffer from the decisions we make now? Absolutely, if we make the effort. But the first thing then is we have to be mindful of the fact that I'm about to just give in to feel good here. I'm about to do some avoidant coping. And if you can become aware of those things, then you can also be aware of the consequences. But none of that's easy because the habit is, I'm out of here. Like this, that's my coping response. So, you know, you have to recognize that time travel isn't easy, but it's all part and parcel of understanding that the only person that's going to get me. And present self has to make a different choice.
Excellent. And now, what about beating ourselves up? I mean, one of the things I see from people who procrastinate all the time, and my old college roommate is a classic example, he would just go to town on himself. He actually damaged his self-esteem from just beating himself up constantly. He was a terrible procrastinator. I mean, his organizational skills were amongst the worst I've ever seen, but he was very smart. And so he would get it done. But man, I mean, it was to the point where watching him beat himself up was actually painful for me to watch, and I had to leave the room when he was doing it because it was just awful. I couldn't even watch.
Yeah, and what he's missing there, of course, is this notion of self-compassion. Michael Wall, Shannon Bennett, and I did a study. It was published back in 2010, as Michael Wall has done a lot of research on self-forgiveness and forgiveness in general. And so we put together this topic on forgiveness and procrastination. Now, I figured that what we'd find is forgive and forget. Those people who forgave themselves would just do more of the same. We didn't, and it surprised me. And so the study we looked at how people who procrastinated on preparing for the first exam, what would happen, would they procrastinate studying for the second exam if they forgave themselves? And I figured it would be forgive and forget, and you'd procrastinate just as much. But what we found was the opposite. Those people who, in preparation for the first exam, procrastinated a lot, but who forgave themselves were less likely to procrastinate in preparation for the second exam. So I said to Michael, I don't get it. Like, why isn't it forgive and forget? He says, well, imagine that you and Jordan had a fight, some sort of transgression, you know. You took his best microphone and you've really annoyed him. So what's the motivation? Well, it'd be avoidance. Jordan wouldn't want to see me. I wouldn't want to see Jordan. He said, so what happens when someone offers some forgiveness? What happens to the motivation? Well, it becomes approach. He said, well, in this case, the transgression is against the self. And so it's not that you've done something to Jordan, you've done something to yourself. You self-sabotaged, you've procrastinated, you've undermined your own goal pursuit. And now, if you don't forgive yourself, what's the motivation around that task? Avoidance. I don't want to be reminded of that. If you forgive yourself, you're more likely to try again. So in life, we've heard that all the time. It's always 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And if procrastination is an issue in your life and you want to make change, you got to be prepared for the fact that you're going to make some backward steps. You're going to have days where you don't live up to your expectations. You don't follow your implementation intentions. You don't just get started. You give in to feel good, all those things. And you've got to accept, okay, it didn't go well yesterday. That's human nature. I'm going to try again. So it's really important not to do what your roommate did. Beat yourself up, lower your self-esteem, because it doesn't help you succeed, right? I'm not saying that it should be forgive and forget, but you have to have some self-compassion. And in fact, we see self-compassion as a very important root in general health as well. If you're always saying negative things to yourself, that rumination can lead to some pretty negative outcomes, including depression.
Wow, so you can actually make yourself depressed by procrastinating and then beating yourself, or the way you treat yourself. It's not.
In fact, we just finished a study. I mean, literally this week. We're writing it up now as a thesis and perhaps as a paper. It's going to be presented at some conferences, and we're trying to predict depression. So, procrastination predicts depression. Well, why? Because your goal pursuit's breaking down and it increases your stress. But what else contributes to that prediction? Rumination certainly adds to the depression. And what counters it? Mindfulness and self-compassion. So that it does the opposite to you. So you have resistance resources like mindfulness and self-compassion, and then you've got liabilities such as nation and procrastination. So all of these things can lead us into some pretty dark places. Not necessarily you're going to be depressed to the point where you're going to need medication, but I see it on campus all the time, and this time of year in particular, the stress is enormous, and a lot of that stress is self-induced because people didn't work when it was in their best interest to work. They've left it to the last minute. The stress is huge, and they're really beating themselves up now like your roommate did. Absolutely.
You gave me a Zen poem here, and I just want to have it explained, because to get a Zen poem explained is a pretty rare opportunity. It says, another pivotal story in my life is from the Zen tradition. A novice seeking enlightenment says to the master, Master, what do I need to do to become enlightened? The master says, have you finished your rice? And the novice replies, yes. The master says, then wash your bowl. What the heck? What is that? I don't get it.
I just think it's one of the most important stories about what life is about. As some Zen writers like Alan Watts have written, this is it. And as I joke, this is not a dress rehearsal, right? That I'm going to come back specifically to that story. But when I think about procrastination, it's not about the all-nighters. It's not even necessarily about the health outcomes or the social effects. It's in a very real way of not getting on with life itself. When we put off things, we're putting off our own lives. We're putting off our own sense of agency. And so what the Zen story has to do is tells, that life is pretty simple. And so this novice is seeking wisdom, seeking to understand and to life in a way that creates this notion of enlightenment. And the master's trying to say, it's right in front of you that this is it, that have you finished your rice, then wash your bowl. That's life. And so in a profound way, it's what we have to do with our tasks. Is it time to do this? Then do that. Don't react to it like my son might with the bed. I don't feel like making the bed. It's not a matter of feeling like it. You're out of your bed now. Just make the bed. Don't do anything more than that. Don't think about it. Just do it. It's that perfect action. So let's imagine you're walking down the street and the person in front of you just drops something out of their briefcase. You just scoop down, pick it up, and offer it to them. It's that simple. And so in our lives, I think that we have to think less and just act. I'm going to give you another twist on that. Do you remember the movie? Robin Williams was the star, and it was about a doctor who had the nickname of Patch. He was a physician who healed by laughter, and the movie was Patch Adams. Did you ever see that?
I don't think so, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, well, Patch Adams is a physician, and he's an activist, and he's an outspoken guy. But Robin Williams played him in this movie, and Patch Adams was up to Ottawa to do a speaking event, and we were both speakers at this event. So it was really interesting to share the stage with this guy and listen to the real Patch Adams and not the Robin Williams speak. And I stuck around for what he had to say, and at the end, I asked him about procrastination because it's my interest. And he laughed, and he just said, "That's baloney." He used a little more colorful language than that. And he said, "Did you try to put your pants on this morning, or did you put on your pants?" And that's what procrastination amounts to. Well, I'm going to try to get that report done on the weekend. You're going to try to put on your pants? And in a sense, it comes back to that Zen story of, have you finished your rice? Then wash your bowl. Did you get out of bed? Then make your bed. Okay, it's time to put your clothes on. Is it work time? Okay, what's in front of you? What report is? Well, just get started on it. Don't make it any more than that. Don't spend all this time in all this, the Buddhists call monkey mind, where you're thinking about all the possible things you could fail on, or how uncertain you are, or how incompetent you are, or what you'd rather be doing. Instead, that mindfulness stance is you take a dispassionate, a step back from it all, a non-judgmental awareness of, look at all these feelings I'm having. Aren't they interesting? And then you just get on with what you're supposed to be doing. Your motivational state does not have to match the task at hand. One last way I think about that, and I think it's really important to me to share this with your listeners, is that there's an author by the name of Parker Palmer, and he's written a book that I use a lot when I talk about teaching, and it's called The Courage to Teach. It comes from the title of a book written by a theologian back in the 1950s called The Courage to Be. And it has a lot to do with this existential reality of procrastination that I'm talking about, this fact that it's not getting on with life itself. Now, Parker Palmer talks about our emotions, and he says that we can have fear, but we need not be our fear. And that's another one of my own personal mantras when I have fear. Yeah, I have this awareness of my fear. I have fear, but I need not be my fear. I can work from some other parts of my inner landscape, he writes, because I also have in me curiosity or interest or ambition. And so I can have fear, but I need not be my fear. I can have aversion, but I need not be my aversion. So I can have all sorts of emotions like, I don't feel like this, I'm bored, I'm frustrated, but I can still move forward. And I think, honestly, for most of us when it comes to procrastination, the kind of tips and tricks and techniques will never cut it until we come down to that face-to-face with our own sense of agency. And we say to ourselves, this is my life. I'm just going to get started, right? I'm going to get on with the person that I want to be. The person who I want to be, what would he or she do right now? And that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to get started. So that's what all that story is about. I think it's rather profound, and it comes back full circle to this notion of not getting on with things. Have you finished your rice? Then wash your bowl.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Dr. Tim Pitchell, and we'll be linking to you on the website as well, procrastination.ca, because I guess .com was probably taken, and, of course, your podcast as well. And thanks so much for your time here. I know we've been putting it off for a while, actually, coincidentally.
Yeah, well, we've played around with it, but it's tough to get busy people together. Yeah, thanks very much. No, I chose .ca. I got my website back in 1994. I got that domain name.
Wow.
And yeah, I was an early adopter of technology, and I still am. You wouldn't believe the technology that's sitting around me right now. But in 94, I was teaching my students how to write HTML tags. This is before we had WYSIWYG HTML editors, because I said, this is the way of the future. And I took .ca because .ca is basically the Canadian version of .edu. So it's basically it was originally designated more for our universities. And so mine was a research-related site, and so it was procrastination.ca, and it distinguished it from a commerce site, which was .com. Now, of course, the world has changed in terms of domain names, but that's why it's procrastination.ca. And for your listeners, what you'll find there are all sorts of free resources. So if I've said something that interests you, I've done a podcast since 2005, not always as regular as it might be because it's a big commitment, but there's lots of interviews up there with other scholars and stuff that you might want to hear about. And I've been writing a blog for Psychology Today for quite a few years now, too. And so anything I've talked about, I've written about or talked about at length. So if something got under your skin and you thought, yeah, that's me, I want to understand that. And there's so many things we didn't talk about, like perfectionism, for example, or anxiety or worry. There's so many things I've got there that's all free, and it's a good resource for you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Pitchell.
All right, show feedback and guest suggestions. We rely on you guys to help keep our finger on the pulse. So if you know someone who's a good fit for the show, let us know at jordanh@theartofcharm.com. Boot camp details for our live programs also at theartofcharm.com, and that's where you're going to find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, and other social media as well. If you're listening to this but you're not subscribed in iTunes or Stitcher or something like that, then that needs to change. Getting our shows delivered free to your phone or computer is the best way to make sure you don't miss a thing. You can do that by going to iTunes and searching for the Art of Charm podcast, or by going to theartofcharm.com/iTunes and clicking subscribe. That's really it. And you guys can help us. Subscribe in iTunes and give us a 5-star rating. Write something nice and we will love you forever. Just go to itunes.com/theartofcharm and it'll take you right there. When you write us a review, it not only makes us feel proud, but it helps keep us up in the ranks so that other people who can use this information can find the show more easily to get the credible advice that they need. It's also the best way to support the show other than purchasing products and training from us. So tell your friends, because the greatest compliment you can give us is a referral to someone else, either in person or shared on the web. Now have a great week. Go out there and get social and leave everything better than you found it.